The community hall was alive with the soft hum of excitement and chatter. Chairs were arranged neatly in rows, and the faint smell of polished wood from the piano mingled with the scent of flowers placed at the entrance. Parents, students, and music lovers filled the seats, their eyes bright with anticipation. Everyone had come to witness the annual piano recital, an event they had marked on their calendars months in advance. They expected to see young prodigies perform flawless pieces, and a few older students who had practiced diligently all year. Among the crowd, a woman quietly stepped inside. She moved carefully, as if she wanted to disturb nothing and no one. Her clothes were plain, soft shades of brown and beige, and she carried a small, worn folder that seemed heavier with memories than with music sheets. She glanced around, her eyes taking in the crowded room, the stage, and the bright lights that reflected off the polished piano keys. She seemed almost invisible among the lively attendees, a shadow who blended into the background. She was not young, though she was not old either. Her face held a calm dignity, but there was a quiet sadness there too, like someone who had lived through moments that demanded patience and quiet strength. She found a seat in the far corner, away from the spotlight, and carefully placed her folder on her lap. She did not draw attention to herself. She only settled in, hoping her presence would not be noticed too much. The room was buzzing with conversations, and she listened, nodding slightly when someone spoke to her, but never interrupting. Around her, people were arranging programs, chatting with friends, and laughing at little jokes about the performers. The woman, however, kept to herself. She opened her folder and gently touched the papers inside, flipping through them with care. Her fingers lingered on the edges, as if greeting old friends. She wasn't just looking at the music sheets. She was connecting with memories, with years gone by. Each note she touched held a story, a heartbeat, a quiet moment in time when the piano had been her closest companion. The organizers of the recital had a quick meeting near the stage. They were a mix of excitement and mild panic because the program had more performers than the schedule allowed. One of them noticed the quiet woman in the corner. She did not stand out, and they had almost forgotten her name in the shuffle of performers. "Who is she again?" One whispered to another. "I think she signed up last minute," the other replied, glancing at the papers. There was uncertainty in their voices, a subtle doubt. They weren't sure she belonged among the young, trained students who had been practicing for months. They almost decided to skip her performance, thinking the audience wouldn't mind. Meanwhile, the woman continued to sit quietly, unaware of the hushed discussion. She closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. She could hear the faint tuning of the piano, the soft shuffling of feet, and the murmurs of anticipation. Her heart was calm, yet it beat with a quiet intensity. She was here for one reason: to play, to let the music speak for her. Even if the world outside this hall had long forgotten her, the performers began to take their places one by one. Young girls with ribbons in their hair, boys in crisp white shirts, each one eager to show the result of their hard work. Their fingers moved nervously, adjusting their posture, stretching their hands, whispering little reminders to themselves. The audience clapped politely as each began, impressed by the skill and precision of their performance. Applause echoed through the hall, and the woman observed quietly, her eyes following each movement, her mind soaking in the music. She was used to being overlooked. In her life, there had been many moments when her abilities, her talent, and her voice were quietly set aside. People had praised others, given opportunities to those who were more confident, more visible, or more connected. Yet here, in this simple community hall, she carried a quiet determination. She did not need recognition from everyone. She only needed a chance to be heard, even if just once. As she watched, she noticed the famous local maestro who had been invited to judge and guide the students. He sat in the front row, an upright figure with an attentive gaze. He seemed focused, almost critical, noting every detail of posture, hand movement, and timing. The woman observed him for a moment. She had met many musicians in her life, some kind and encouraging, others harsh and indifferent. There was a sense of authority in him that could intimidate, but it also carried a possibility, a chance that someone who understood music deeply might notice the soul behind her fingers if she ever got the chance to play. Her hands rested on the folder, gently touching the pages inside. She was ready. She had practiced in solitude, in dimly lit rooms, in moments stolen between daily responsibilities and long years of caring for family. Music had been her sanctuary, her friend, her escape. She had never sought fame or applause, only the ability to express what words could never capture. And tonight, for the first time in a long time, she would share that with others. The room continued to fill with people, and the hum of conversation never stopped. Children whispered to each other about who would win applause. Parents nudged each other in quiet excitement, and students adjusted their music sheets nervously. No one really noticed the woman in the corner, except for a few curious glances that quickly drifted away. She was part of the scenery, a quiet presence that didn't demand attention. But inside, she carried a storm of emotions: anticipation, nervousness, hope, and the faint flicker of joy. Time moved forward, and the first performers finished their pieces. The audience clapped politely, and the atmosphere buzzed with the energy of the event. The woman remained seated, listening, absorbing, and waiting for her turn. She didn't fidget or pace. She simply sat, a calm presence in the midst of activity. Her mind wandered briefly to her past memories of her father teaching her notes, of late nights spent practicing in silence, of the joy that music had always brought her. Those memories were alive, vibrant, and ready to guide her fingers. Nearby, a few parents and students whispered to each other about her. "Do you know who she is?" one asked. "No idea," replied another. "I think she's just someone who signed up last minute." There was a subtle judgment in their voices, an assumption that because she was older and modestly dressed, she couldn't possibly perform at the level of the younger students. The woman, unaware of these whispers, adjusted her folder, straightened her back slightly, and took a slow, calming breath. The organizers were still unsure. Some suggested that she might be allowed to play after all, a brief piece, nothing too long. Others hesitated, worried about the schedule. The whispers of doubt filled the air, but none of them considered that this quiet woman, overlooked and underestimated, might be about to do something extraordinary. Her presence in the room was small, almost invisible, but the music inside her had waited patiently, growing stronger in silence. She closed her eyes again, feeling the rhythm of her own heartbeat. Each beat matched the memory of a note played years ago, each pulse a reminder of the connection she had with the piano. She didn't think about the audience, the whispers, or the doubts. She only thought about the music, about letting it flow naturally, about allowing herself to be fully present in the moment. This was her time, even if just for a few minutes. As the next performer finished and the applause faded, the organizers finally called her name. It was soft, almost hesitant. The room's attention shifted briefly, but many people barely noticed her. She rose slowly, holding her folder carefully, and walked to the stage. Her movements were composed, unhurried, and graceful. She did not rush, did not bow excessively, did not seek to impress with gestures. She simply approached the piano, opened her folder, and sat down on the bench. A hush settled over the room. Some people exchanged curious glances, wondering if this quiet, humble woman could really perform. The maestro in the front row adjusted his posture slightly, his eyes now on her, intrigued by the calm confidence she carried despite the simplicity of her appearance. She took a deep breath, placed her fingers lightly on the keys, and paused for a moment. It was a pause full of intention, full of quiet energy, a moment that held the potential of something unexpected. In that moment, all the chatter, all the whispers, all the expectations of the audience faded. The room seemed to narrow down to her and the piano. The notes she would play were waiting, like friends who had been separated for years, ready to speak again. Her fingers hovered, then pressed the first key, and a soft, warm note filled the hall. It was gentle, simple, yet unmistakably alive. The music began to speak, and though it was only the first note, there was a sense that something special had just begun. The notes she played were soft and gentle at first, like the beginning of a quiet conversation. The audience had barely noticed, many still shifting in their seats, whispering to neighbors about the next student, or commenting on the performers who had already finished. But gradually, something changed. The music drew attention, subtle at first, but powerful enough to quiet the murmurs. People leaned forward, unconsciously holding their breath as her fingers danced over the keys. Each note was precise yet full of emotion, carrying a sense of longing and quiet joy that seemed to touch something deep within everyone listening. She didn't rush or try to impress. There were no grand gestures or flashy movements. Her hands moved naturally, guided by years of silent practice and love for the piano. The melody had a gentle flow, rising and falling like a calm river, sometimes playful, sometimes tender. The listeners started noticing the beauty and the unexpected simplicity of her playing. Even the youngest students, who had been fidgeting and whispering moments ago, stopped and turned their heads toward her. Parents glanced at one another in surprise, unsure how to respond, yet captivated by the warmth of her music. From the corner of the room, she could see the maestro sitting upright, his sharp eyes fixed on her. He was known for his critical approach, for seeing even the smallest flaw, yet now he appeared silent, almost mesmerized. Something about her playing had stopped him in his tracks. He leaned slightly forward, elbows on his knees, watching her fingers as they moved with quiet confidence. He noticed her technique, but more than that, he felt the emotion behind each note, the honesty that could not be learned in any music school. Around the hall, the whispers that had once questioned her presence disappeared. People were no longer talking. They were listening. Even those who had initially judged her plain appearance or assumed she was inexperienced felt a stirring of surprise and admiration. Her music had begun to speak louder than appearances, louder than assumptions, louder than the polite applause that had greeted others. The room felt different, softer somehow, as if her melody had a gentle power to draw everyone into the same moment. She closed her eyes as she played, feeling every note with her heart. Memories came to her like waves. Evenings spent in a small room with a lamp, casting a warm glow over the piano. The sound of her own fingers pressing keys in solitude. The quiet encouragement of her father, who had first taught her how to listen to music not just with her ears, but with her soul. She had not played in public for many years, but those years had not dulled her passion. Instead, they had deepened it, adding layers of feeling and understanding that only life's experiences could teach. Occasionally, she glanced at the audience, not to seek approval, but to feel their energy, to connect through the music. Faces in the crowd reflected curiosity, surprise, and slowly, admiration. A few parents whispered softly to each other, unsure how to put into words what they were hearing. Some students, previously confident in their own skills, found themselves quiet and reflective. The music had an honesty that could not be compared, a truth that felt alive and present in the moment. The melody shifted slightly, introducing a gentle tension that hinted at longing, at moments that had passed, at unspoken emotions. She didn't need to explain it. The notes themselves told the story. Her fingers moved with ease, yet the movement was deliberate, thoughtful, carrying a subtle authority that spoke of years spent mastering herself, if not the applause of the world. She allowed the pauses to linger, letting the audience feel the spaces between the notes. The quiet that made the sound more profound. Some people began to lean in, closer to the stage, as if wanting to absorb every vibration from the piano. The maestro's expression remained serious, but his eyes softened slightly, reflecting recognition of something rare. He had seen many talented performers, but there was something different here. The music was not just skill. It was lived experience, a story woven through each key, each chord. It was a reflection of a life lived quietly, patiently, with both hardship and beauty. She noticed a young boy near the front, his hand still clutched around his mother's arm, his eyes wide and attentive. She had taught children before, long ago, and the sight reminded her of her own younger days, when she had been encouraged by a mentor who saw potential in her. That memory brought a smile to her face, though she kept her eyes on the piano. She wanted her music to reach everyone, to speak to those who had ears and hearts willing to listen, whether young or old. The room, once filled with chatter, now held a quiet reverence. Each person present felt the intimacy of her performance, the subtle connection between the performer and the audience. The applause for previous performers had been polite, almost obligatory, but now there was a sense of anticipation, of awe, a collective acknowledgement that something unusual and beautiful was unfolding before them. No one wanted to interrupt the flow. No one dared to break the spell. She moved into a section of the piece that was more intricate, requiring subtle shifts in tempo and touch. Her fingers never hesitated. They responded to the music as naturally as breathing. There was joy in the melody, hints of mischief and playfulness that made people smile inwardly, and deeper notes that spoke of longing and remembrance. Each person in the audience connected differently, but all felt the honesty and depth of her expression. The maestro's posture changed slightly as he leaned closer to observe. He noticed the balance in her hands, the way she communicated emotion without exaggeration, the way she allowed the music to breathe. This was not just technical skill. It was artistry born of experience, patience, and an understanding that music is as much about silence as it is about sound. He could feel the authenticity, the sincerity, and he found himself reconsidering his initial skepticism. In the back, a few audience members who had been chatting or checking their phones now sat upright, fully immersed. Their earlier judgments melted away, replaced by surprise and quiet admiration. No one had expected such depth from the humble woman sitting quietly in the corner moments ago. Yet here she was, captivating everyone, not with showy performance, but with heartfelt music that resonated deep inside. She noticed a gentle nod from the maestro, barely perceptible, but enough to reassure her. She did not change her playing for him or anyone else. She continued to follow the flow of the music, allowing it to emerge naturally. The audience felt that sincerity, and it bound them together in that moment. Each person was no longer just a spectator. They were participants in a shared experience, touched by the honesty and grace of her performance. The piece reached a delicate climax, soft but powerful, a convergence of light and shadow and sound. She allowed the last notes to linger, fading gently into silence. For a moment, the hall remained completely quiet. No one moved, no one spoke. The hush was almost tangible, as if the audience was reluctant to let go of the magic that had just unfolded. She sat still, her fingers resting lightly on the keys, her eyes closed briefly as she breathed in the moment. Then, slowly, the room erupted in applause. It began softly, tentative at first, but quickly grew louder as people clapped with genuine admiration. Some stood, unable to contain their appreciation, while others wiped away small tears of unexpected emotion. The humble woman remained seated for a moment, allowing the music to settle within the hearts of those listening. She did not bow excessively or seek acknowledgement. Her satisfaction was quiet, internal, a simple acknowledgement that she had shared her truth and it had been received. The maestro rose from his seat, approaching her with deliberate steps. His eyes reflected respect and a hint of wonder. He extended a hand, not just in courtesy, but in recognition of the talent and depth he had witnessed. She smiled gently, accepting the gesture without fanfare. In that brief interaction, a connection was made, a mutual understanding that artistry can exist quietly, unexpectedly, and profoundly. Audience members lingered, some approaching her quietly to express their admiration. They spoke of the beauty of her performance, the way it had touched them, the emotions it had evoked. She listened humbly, nodding, offering simple words of thanks, but the real conversation had already taken place through the music. The applause and recognition were secondary to the deeper truth that she had shared a piece of her soul, and it had resonated. The hall gradually returned to its regular rhythm, but the memory of her performance lingered. Conversations now carried mentions of the quiet woman who had surprised everyone, the talent that had been hidden behind a modest exterior, and the depth that could only come from life lived fully, even if quietly. Children whispered to their parents about how unexpected her skill had been, and students spoke in hushed tones of the inspiration they felt. She packed her folder carefully, a small smile playing on her lips. The performance had not been about fame or applause. It had been about reclaiming something precious, something that had been dormant for years. As she left the stage, she felt lighter, more complete, as if the music had lifted a burden she had carried for decades. She had stepped into a world that had initially ignored her, and she had left a mark without intending to, simply by sharing her gift honestly and fully. Outside the hall, the cool evening air welcomed her. She took a deep breath, savoring the sensation of accomplishment and quiet joy. As she walked away from the piano that evening, her mind drifted back to the many years she had spent away from public performance. Music had been a constant companion in her life, yet for decades she had played only for herself, quietly in her home or in moments stolen from daily chores. There had been reasons, personal and necessary, that had kept her from the stage. Caring for family, navigating life's demands, and placing others' needs before her own had meant that her talent remained hidden. And yet, that talent had never faded. It had simply waited, patient and resilient, like a seed beneath the soil. She remembered her childhood, sitting beside the old piano in a modest living room. Her father had been a musician, not professionally trained, but gifted in his own right. He had taught her the basics, showing her how to feel music rather than just play it. He encouraged her to listen to the subtle differences in tones, to notice the emotion in each note, and to play with honesty. Those lessons were more than just technique. They were a philosophy. She had carried that philosophy through every silent year, every night of practice alone, and it had become part of her identity. When she was younger, she had imagined performing publicly, receiving applause, and sharing her music widely. But life had other plans. Responsibilities came early, pulling her away from the ambitions she once held close. Family matters, work, and daily obligations took precedence. She learned to find joy in private moments, to pour herself into the music in ways that did not demand recognition. Her piano became a confidant, a place where she could express sorrow, joy, and longing without words. And now, after years of quiet devotion, she had taken a small but significant step into the public eye. Even during her private years of practice, she had felt the occasional pang of regret, the thought that perhaps she had delayed her chance too long. But she also knew that every moment of waiting had strengthened her. The years had given depth to her understanding of music, a richness born from life itself. Each challenge she faced, each moment of loss or triumph, had been translated into the language of keys and chords. When she finally sat at the piano tonight, all of that life experience resonated in every note. her mind shifted to the community hall where she had played. The applause, though unexpected, had been a confirmation that her music could touch others, that the long years of solitude had not been wasted. She thought of the faces in the audience, the initial doubts and whispers that had been replaced by attention and admiration. It had been more than just performing. It had been an exchange, a moment of connection between her heart and the hearts of those who listened. That connection was rare and precious, and it had reminded her why she loved to play. She also thought of the young boy who had been so attentive during her performance. His wide eyes, filled with curiosity and wonder, had reminded her of the reasons people begin their musical journeys. Talent is not just about skill. It is also about inspiration, about planting seeds that may grow in unexpected ways. Perhaps her performance tonight would encourage someone to pursue their own passion, to persevere quietly until the right moment arrived. She felt a quiet satisfaction at that thought. Her memories wandered further, to times when she had tried to share her music in small, intimate settings. Friends and acquaintances had praised her gently, but she had always felt that something essential was missing. Applause alone had never been the goal. It was the sharing of emotion, the ability to communicate without words, that mattered most. She realized that tonight she had finally experienced that fully. The audience had not merely heard her play, they had felt it thought. There was also a moment of reflection on the maestro. He had been so composed, so attentive, yet his reaction had been unmistakable. She had felt the recognition in his eyes, the understanding that her music was not just technically correct, but deeply expressive. That acknowledgement, though unspoken, meant more to her than any accolades or awards. In his quiet respect, she saw a mirror of her own values, dedication, sincerity, and a lifelong love for music that transcended fame. As she walked home through the quiet streets, the memories of her life intertwined with the echoes of the music she had played. She remembered evenings when she had practiced in dim light, fingers moving over the keys with careful attention, often accompanied by the soft hum of a household going about its routines. There were nights when fatigue and frustration tempted her to give up, but she persisted. The piano had been a friend, a guide, and sometimes a confidant when no one else could understand her heart. The years had not been easy. There had been moments of loneliness when she wondered if she had made the right choices, if she had sacrificed too much. But those years had also been rich in lessons about patience, resilience, and the quiet strength of pursuing a passion, even when recognition seems distant. Every challenge she faced had added a new layer to her music, a subtle complexity that could be felt in every phrase she played. She thought about the feeling of returning to music after such a long absence from public performance. It had been nerve-wracking, yes, but also liberating. The familiar touch of the keys beneath her fingers, the resonance of the sound filling the hall, reminded her why she had fallen in love with music in the first place. Fear and hesitation melted away as the melody flowed naturally, guided by years of practice and lived experience. It was not about perfection. It was about truth, honesty, and the courage to share her inner world with others. The experience tonight also reminded her that life offers second chances in unexpected ways. She had waited a long time to perform publicly, but the timing had been perfect. She realized that every moment of preparation, every year of patience, had led her to this one performance where her music could truly resonate. The thought brought a gentle smile to her face, a mixture of pride and gratitude. She recalled small moments from her childhood, sneaking extra minutes at the piano when she thought no one was watching, listening to her own mistakes and learning to forgive herself. Those quiet times had shaped her, teaching her humility and perseverance. The music had never been just about skill or recognition. It had been a lifeline, a source of comfort and expression. That understanding now made her performance feel even more meaningful, as though every note had a story, every phrase a memory dot as she walked. She also thought about the people who had doubted her. There had been whispers and glances that suggested she didn't belong on that stage, that her age or appearance somehow made her less worthy. She did not hold anger or resentment for them. Instead, she felt a quiet sense of triumph. Her music had spoken louder than doubt, louder than assumptions, and it had reached hearts in a way that words could not. That realization brought a sense of peace and fulfillment. She thought about the way music connects people, even strangers. Tonight, the community hall had been filled with people of all ages, each carrying their own experiences and emotions. Her performance had created a shared moment, a silent understanding that transcended differences. That connection was what made music powerful and why she had always loved it. She felt privileged to have been the conduit for that shared experience, even if it was brief. Walking home, she reflected on the changes this performance might bring. Perhaps she would be invited to play again, or maybe this would remain a singular moment of personal triumph. Either way, the experience had reminded her of her own strength and the importance of pursuing one's passion despite life's obstacles. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, a quiet determination to continue playing, practicing, and sharing her music in ways that felt authentic and meaningful. She also pondered the impact of this performance on the audience. The young boy's curiosity, the parents' admiration, the students' newfound reflection. These were all small ripples of influence that could grow in ways she might never see. Music had a subtle power, and by sharing hers, she had planted seeds of inspiration. The thought filled her with a warm sense of fulfillment, knowing that her dedication had created more than just a performance. It had created an experience that could linger in the hearts of others. The walk back to her home was quiet and serene. The cool night air, the distant sounds of the city, and the occasional passing car created a gentle rhythm that complemented her thoughts. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the life she had lived, the music she had nurtured, and the opportunity to finally share it. There was a profound understanding that life's challenges, sacrifices, and quiet moments of dedication all contributed to the depth and beauty of her artistry. As she reached her door and turned the key, she paused to reflect on the evening. The applause, the recognition, the quiet admiration, it was all meaningful, but not as meaningful as the personal journey she had undertaken to reach this point. She felt a renewed connection to her own passion, a sense that the music within her was alive and ready to continue expressing the complexities and beauty of life. Each key, each note, was a continuation of a story that had begun long ago and would continue as long as she played. Once inside, she sat down at her own piano, now bathed in the soft glow of a single lamp. The room was familiar and comforting, filled with memories of countless hours spent in practice and reflection. She opened her folder carefully and let her fingers move across the keys. The music flowed naturally, no low. The next morning, she woke with the memory of the previous night still vivid in her mind. The quiet applause, the smiles of the audience, and the gentle nod of the maestro kept replaying in her thoughts. Yet, alongside the joy, a flicker of nervousness returned. She wondered what people would say outside the walls of the recital hall. Would they remember her performance? Would they see her the same way now, or would it fade into the background, just another name on the program? These thoughts were fleeting, but they carried the weight of years spent hidden, unnoticed, and quietly judged. She had returned to her routine, but the memory of the stage lingered. Every time she touched her piano, she could feel the echo of the hall, the sound of her own music filling a space larger than her own home. For the first time, she realized that performing was not just about the notes. It was about presence, about allowing herself to be seen and heard without apology. That recognition, even if brief, had awakened a part of her that she had almost forgotten. The day passed with its usual tasks, preparing meals, tending to small chores, and walking through familiar streets. Yet, every sound seemed slightly more vivid, every small interaction richer. When she walked past children practicing outside, she felt a kinship, remembering the days when she had been young and eager to learn. A gentle warmth filled her heart as she recalled the way music had shaped her life, providing comfort and joy in moments that otherwise felt ordinary. Later in the day, she received a call from the community hall. The organizer's voice was a mix of surprise and excitement. They had been talking after the recital, replaying the events of the evening. The performance had left a lasting impression, and they wanted to discuss possibilities for her to perform again. The woman listened quietly, grateful yet hesitant. She had not sought recognition or opportunity. She had only wanted to play. But the thought of sharing her music again, and perhaps inspiring others, stirred a quiet thrill within her. She reflected on the maestro's reaction during her performance. There had been something unspoken in his acknowledgement, a hint of understanding and respect that went beyond critique. He had been attentive, watching every movement of her hands, feeling the emotion in her playing. That recognition, subtle yet profound, had touched her deeply. It reminded her that true artistry is not about applause alone. It is about connection, sincerity, and the courage to reveal oneself honestly. As she considered the possibilities, she felt a mixture of excitement and fear. Public performance had always been daunting, even when her love for music outweighed her nerves. Yet, tonight, she felt a newfound confidence. She had faced the stage after years of quiet practice, and her music had spoken for itself. That experience had shifted something within her, revealing a strength and resilience that had grown silently over decades. The thought of preparing for another performance brought both anticipation and careful planning. She considered the pieces she might choose, each one holding memories and emotions from different periods of her life. Some were joyful, reflecting moments of happiness and freedom. Others were more introspective, carrying the weight of loss and reflection. Each piece had a story, a personal history that would be felt by those listening. She realized that selecting what to play was not just a technical decision. It was an emotional one, a way to share herself without words. Her reflections also wandered to the audience from the previous night. She remembered the expressions, the quiet attentiveness, and the unspoken connection that had formed. It was remarkable how a simple melody could bridge gaps between strangers, conveying feelings that words could never fully capture. The memory inspired her to continue, to embrace the chance to touch lives through music. However small or fleeting those moments might be, the afternoon passed with quiet thoughtfulness. She returned to her piano, exploring scales and chords, letting her fingers remember the motions and expressions of her performance. She experimented with transitions between pieces, practicing subtle dynamics and pauses, and discovering new nuances in familiar melodies. Even in solitude, she found joy in the creative process, allowing the music to guide her and reveal new layers of emotion and understanding. Later, she met with the community hall organizers to discuss potential opportunities. They were eager, impressed by her natural talent and the impact she had made on the audience. They suggested small performances at local events, workshops for students, or collaborative projects with other musicians. She listened attentively, weighing each suggestion, her heart filled with both gratitude and careful consideration. She had never sought attention, but the thought of sharing her music with others felt meaningful, as if the years of quiet dedication were finally opening a door she had long ignored. The day continued with small errands, a walk to the nearby park, and moments of reflection on her own journey. She felt a growing awareness of how music had shaped her life, from childhood lessons to solitary nights at the piano, and now to public recognition. Each stage had been important, each pause necessary, and each challenge had contributed to the depth of her artistry. She felt a quiet sense of pride and accomplishment, tempered by humility, knowing that her path had been unique and valuable. In the evening, she returned home and sat by her piano once more. She carefully selected a piece that had always brought her comfort, a melody that reflected both longing and hope. As she played, she allowed herself to feel each note fully, experiencing the joy, melancholy, and beauty embedded in the music. She imagined the audience from the recital, the attentive faces, and the quiet appreciation, and she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Music was not just for her. It was a bridge to others, a way to communicate and connect. As the night deepened, she reflected on the journey that had led her here. Life had demanded patience, resilience, and quiet devotion, and she had embraced each challenge. The years of practice, reflection, and solitude had not been wasted. They had enriched her, preparing her for this moment of sharing. She realized that true artistry is born from lived experience, from the integration of emotion, memory, and technical skill. Her music was now an extension of her life, a narrative that could be shared with others. She also considered the future. There were possibilities for collaboration, small concerts, and opportunities to teach and inspire younger musicians. Each possibility carried both excitement and responsibility. She felt a quiet determination to approach these opportunities with the same honesty and dedication that had guided her throughout her life. The thought of continuing her journey, of allowing her music to reach others, filled her with hope and anticipation. Throughout the day, she encountered moments of reflection and connection. A neighbor paused to ask about the recital, expressing admiration for her performance. Children practicing outside waved and smiled, inspired by the idea that someone like her could share such beautiful music. These small interactions reinforced the idea that her music had an impact beyond the stage, reaching people in unexpected and meaningful ways. As she prepared for bed, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the mentors and family who had nurtured her talent, for the years of quiet practice, for the chance to perform, and for the community that had welcomed her music. She understood that her journey was ongoing, that the path ahead held both challenges and joys, and that her music would continue to evolve as she did. Each note she played was a reflection of her life, her choices, and her dedication. Before sleeping, she placed her hands lightly on the piano one last time that evening, letting her fingers linger on the keys. She felt the vibrations, the memories, and the emotions flowing through her. It was a quiet moment of connection, a personal ritual that reminded her of the power and beauty of music. She closed her eyes and allowed herself to dream of future performances, of shared moments, and of the continued journey that lay ahead. She knew that this was only the beginning of a new chapter, one where her music could continue to touch hearts, inspire, and create connections in ways she had never imagined. As the night grew deeper, she finally lay down, her mind at ease, her heart full of quiet satisfaction. She had faced the stage after years of absence, had shared her music with authenticity, and had found a place in the hearts of those who listened. The experience had transformed her, revealing strength, resilience, and a renewed sense of purpose. She understood that her music was not just a personal journey. It was a gift, a bridge between lives, a source of connection, and a story that would continue to unfold with each new note she played. The day of her next performance arrived, and she felt a quiet anticipation that was both familiar and new. This time, she was not just stepping onto a stage at a community recital. The organizers had arranged a small event in a neighboring town, and a modest but attentive crowd was expected. She packed her folder carefully, checking the sheets and ensuring every detail was in order. Each piece she planned to play carried a memory, a story, and an emotion that she wanted to convey. The preparation itself was a ritual, a way to connect with the music before sharing it with others. As she walked toward the venue, she reflected on the journey that had led her here. The previous recital had been a turning point, a moment where her quiet years of practice were finally acknowledged. Yet she understood that each performance was unique, and she had to remain present and focused. The nerves she once felt had transformed into a steady awareness, a careful attention to both her inner feelings and the music itself. The journey was not about showing off skill, but about being honest and present, letting the music carry the story. Upon entering the hall, she was greeted with friendly faces from the organizing committee. They welcomed her warmly, clearly impressed by her previous performance, and eager to see what she would bring this time. There were musicians tuning their instruments, chairs being arranged, and lights adjusted. The atmosphere was alive with preparation, yet calm and focused. She quietly found a seat near the piano, allowing herself a moment to observe, to breathe, and to attune to the space around her. Audience members began to arrive, filling the chairs gradually. She noticed the curiosity in their expressions, the anticipation that builds before a performance. Some were local music enthusiasts, others friends or relatives of performers. There was a sense of expectation, but unlike the first recital, this time there was a gentle openness, a willingness to listen and be moved. She felt a quiet connection forming, a bridge she could build with each note she played. The maestro who had recognized her talent in the first recital was present again, sitting in the front row. His eyes followed her as she approached the piano to warm up. She felt a sense of reassurance in his attentive presence, though she did not seek approval. His reaction was not necessary. It was only a reflection of the authenticity of her music that mattered. She touched the keys, feeling the familiar sensation, and allowed her fingers to move through scales and chords, reconnecting with the instrument as an extension of herself. When the time came, the organizers invited her to the stage. The audience's attention shifted immediately, a hush falling over the room. She walked calmly, carrying her folder, and sat at the piano bench. The first note resonated, gentle and deliberate. She closed her eyes, feeling the music flow from memory, from experience, from the quiet understanding that had grown over years of private practice. The melody began softly, slowly capturing the attention of everyone present. As she played, she noticed subtle reactions in the audience. Eyes widened, heads tilted, and a few people leaned forward, drawn into the sound. The music had layers, moving from tender softness to bursts of expressive energy, revealing both joy and sorrow. She did not force the notes. They emerged naturally, reflecting a depth of feeling that could not be fabricated. The audience, sensing the authenticity, responded with quiet attentiveness. The space seemed to transform, the sound weaving an invisible thread connecting everyone there. Her fingers moved with ease, guided by instinct and memory. She explored a passage with gentle improvisation, allowing the emotion to shape the timing and dynamics. Each chord carried meaning, each pause a breath in the conversation between her and the audience. It was not a performance for recognition, but a shared experience, a communication that transcended words. The audience felt it, responding subtly through posture, facial expressions, and the gentle silence that often follows a moving moment. In the midst of her playing, she recalled memories that had influenced her pieces. Nights spent alone, practicing under dim light. Moments of frustration and triumph. Memories of family and friends who had encouraged her quietly. The music became a reflection of her life, each phrase a chapter, each note a heartbeat. She felt connected not only to the audience, but also to herself, to the woman she had been and the woman she had become. The maestro observed closely, noting the evolution of her style since the first recital. There was maturity in her expression, a confidence that did not rely on display but on substance. He saw how she controlled the emotion, how she allowed the music to breathe, and how she connected with listeners naturally. He understood that her talent was not only technical but deeply human, a reflection of lived experience, patience, and sincerity. As the piece progressed, the melody grew more complex, intertwining themes of joy, reflection, and longing. The audience remained silent, fully immersed. Some were moved to lean closer, some closed their eyes, absorbing the music fully. She noticed the subtle gestures, the quiet smiles, the occasional tear of emotion. These responses were not for show. They were genuine proof that the music had reached them, had spoken to them in ways words could not. Her heart felt light yet full, carrying a blend of vulnerability and strength. She allowed herself to feel every emotion that arose, channeling it into the music. The performance was not about perfection, but about presence, honesty, and communication. The sound of each note was a reflection of her journey, her resilience, and her dedication. She understood deeply that music is more than an art form. It is a language of the heart, and tonight she was fluent. As the final notes lingered and faded, a deep silence held the room. The audience sat quietly for a moment, savoring the conclusion. Then applause erupted, genuine and heartfelt, filling the hall with warmth. Some people stood, clapping with visible enthusiasm, while others simply smiled, their eyes reflecting admiration. She remained seated for a moment, letting the applause wash over her, feeling its sincerity without needing to seek it. The maestro approached after the performance, extending a hand with quiet respect. There was no need for elaborate praise. The acknowledgement in his eyes conveyed understanding, admiration, and recognition of the journey she had undertaken. She accepted the gesture, offering a humble nod, knowing that the connection had already been made through the music itself. The interaction, brief yet meaningful, underscored the power of authenticity and dedication. Audience members came forward, sharing their reflections and gratitude. Some spoke of the beauty and emotional depth of her playing. Others described the inspiration they felt. She listened, responding with gentle words of thanks, aware that the true dialogue had occurred through the music. Each interaction reinforced the realization that sharing her talent could touch lives in ways she had never imagined, creating a ripple effect beyond the notes themselves. After leaving the stage, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The performance had confirmed what she had already known, that her dedication, patience, and quiet years of practice had not been wasted. They had prepared her for this moment of connection and expression. The experience strengthened her commitment to continue playing, to share her music authentically, and to explore new opportunities to reach audiences. No matter the size of the venue or the formality of the setting, she walked home slowly, reflecting on the significance of the day. Each step was measured, thoughtful, carrying a sense of calm fulfillment. The city around her felt familiar yet alive with possibility. She noticed the small details, the rustle of leaves, the distant laughter of children, the glow of streetlights, and felt gratitude for the life she had lived and the experiences that had shaped her music. These ordinary moments were intertwined with her art, enriching it and giving it depth. Later that evening, she sat at her own piano once more. The house was quiet, and the lamp cast a warm glow on the keys. She allowed her fingers to move freely, exploring new passages, refining familiar ones, and letting creativity guide her. The experience of performing earlier in the day enriched her playing, adding subtle nuances and emotional resonance. She understood that every performance, every note, and every reflection contributed to the ongoing growth of her artistry. She also considered how music connects people in unexpected ways. A single melody could evoke memories, stir emotions, and bridge gaps between individuals who had never met. Her journey had shown her that true artistry is not about recognition or fame, but about sincerity, connection, and the courage to reveal one's inner world. By sharing her music, she had created moments of understanding and empathy, small but meaningful threads in the tapestry of human experience. As the night deepened, she allowed herself to reflect on the path she had traveled, The challenges, sacrifices, and quiet dedication had shaped not only her music, but her character. She felt a sense of completeness, knowing that her efforts had borne fruit and that her passion could continue to flourish. The journey was ongoing, but she approached it with confidence, knowing that authenticity, patience, and heart would guide her through each step. Finally, she paused, letting her hands rest lightly on the keys. The silence was not empty. It was filled with reflection, gratitude, and possibility. She understood that music was not just an art, but a reflection of life, a conversation between hearts, and a way to leave a lasting impress. The evening of the final performance arrived, and she felt a mixture of anticipation and calm resolve. This time, it was not merely about demonstrating skill, but about fully embracing the journey she had undertaken. She had grown confident in her artistry, yet she remained humble, understanding that music is not about display, but about connection and truth. She packed her music sheets carefully, selecting pieces that carried the breadth of her experiences, the joy, the sorrow, and the quiet reflections that had shaped her life. As she approached the venue, she noticed the familiar sights, the stage, the lights, and the quiet murmur of the audience settling in. She felt a sense of belonging, a recognition that her presence was welcomed and anticipated. People she did not know smiled at her, offering warm greetings that reflected their curiosity and expectation. She returned their smiles with quiet grace, focusing her attention on the piano, her companion through decades of private study and reflection. Backstage, she prepared herself. She touched the keys lightly, feeling their familiar textures, letting her fingers remember the movements that had carried her through years of practice. The room was filled with other performers, each with their own talents and anxieties. Yet she felt centered, aware that her performance was a reflection of her journey, not a competition. She drew a deep breath, allowing the quiet energy of the space to settle within her. When she was called to the stage, the audience turned their attention fully toward her. There was an expectant hush, a gentle anticipation that she welcomed. She walked calmly, holding her folder close, and sat at the piano bench. The familiar warmth of the keys greeted her fingers as she closed her eyes briefly, centering herself. The first note sounded soft and deliberate, carrying with it years of patience, practice, and personal history. From the beginning, the music spoke with clarity and emotion. Each phrase was carefully shaped, a balance between technical mastery and heartfelt expression. The audience responded immediately, leaning forward, listening intently, captivated by the authenticity of her playing. The maestro, present once more, observed closely, recognizing the depth and maturity in her performance. His earlier acknowledgment had been a seed. Now it was fully realized in the resonance and power of her music. The melody evolved, moving through quiet, reflective passages into more lively, expressive sections. Her fingers danced with confidence, guided by intuition and experience. Each note carried emotion, telling a story without words, and every pause allowed the audience to feel the weight of silence, enhancing the depth of the music. She felt fully present, aware of the impact each phrase had on those listening, and deeply connected to the shared experience. Throughout the performance, she drew upon her memories, the quiet moments of practice, the guidance from mentors, and the subtle lessons of patience and resilience. She allowed those experiences to flow naturally into her music, transforming technical skill into an expression of life lived fully, even through years of quiet dedication. The audience sensed this authenticity, responding with attention and emotion, many feeling moved by the honesty conveyed through each note. At times, the music became playful, joyful, and light, reflecting the moments of happiness she had experienced. At other times, it was introspective, carrying a sense of longing and reflection that resonated deeply. The interplay of emotion, technique, and personal history created a performance that was both captivating and intimate. Every person in the hall became part of the story. Participants in the silent dialogue that unfolded between the pianist and her audience, the maestro, attentive throughout, saw the culmination of her journey in every movement and phrase. He recognized the transformation from the quiet, overlooked woman in the first recital to the confident, expressive artist before him now. His respect was evident, not through words, but through the way he observed, leaning forward slightly, absorbing each nuance, and feeling the emotion carried by the music as she reached the final section of her performance. The melody softened, slowing into gentle, deliberate phrases that allowed the audience to savor the conclusion. Her fingers lingered over the keys, letting the final notes resonate fully, fading naturally into silence. The stillness that followed was profound, a testament to the impact of her music and the connection she had established. She remained seated, her eyes closed briefly, allowing herself to feel the culmination of her journey and the shared experience with the audience. When she finally opened her eyes, the applause was immediate and heartfelt. It began softly and grew into a wave of appreciation that filled the hall. Some stood, clapping with visible emotion, while others offered quiet smiles of admiration. The recognition was genuine, an acknowledgement not only of her talent, but of the dedication, patience, and authenticity that had brought her to this moment. She accepted it with humble gratitude, understanding that the applause was not the goal, but a reflection of the resonance her music had created. The maestro approached her once the applause settled. His expression was one of respect and recognition, acknowledging the depth, skill, and emotion that had defined her performance. They exchanged a brief conversation, his words encouraging and sincere, offering guidance and opportunities for future engagements. She listened attentively, grateful for the acknowledgement yet maintaining her humility, knowing that the true reward had been the music itself and the connection forged with those listening. Audience members approached to share their thoughts and gratitude. They spoke of the beauty and emotional depth of her performance, of how the music had touched them personally. She responded with gentle words, expressing appreciation for their presence and attention. The interactions were meaningful, but she knew the true dialogue had occurred through the music, through the emotional exchange that had transcended words and connected hearts. After leaving the venue, she walked home slowly, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. The quiet years of practice, the moments of doubt and perseverance, and the courage to step onto the stage had all contributed to the richness of her artistry. She felt a profound sense of fulfillment, understanding that her music had reached others, inspiring and moving them, and that her dedication had borne fruit in ways she could not have anticipated. Back at her home, she returned to her piano, the instrument now a symbol of her journey and achievements. She played softly, exploring familiar melodies and improvising gently, allowing the music to flow naturally. The notes carried her emotions, memories, and reflections, connecting her past, present, and future. She played not for an audience, but for herself, reaffirming the love and connection that had always guided her journey. As the night deepened, she paused, resting her hands lightly on the keys. She reflected on the lessons learned, patience, dedication, humility, and the courage to share one's inner world. She understood that her music was more than a personal expression. It was a gift, a bridge between lives, a source of connection and understanding. Each note she played had the power to touch hearts, to inspire, and to create moments of shared humanity. She felt gratitude for the mentors, family, and friends who had nurtured her talent and encouraged her journey, and for the audience who had welcomed her music with open hearts. The journey had been long, filled with quiet dedication, challenges, and moments of doubt, but it had also been rich with discovery, growth, and fulfillment. She knew that the path ahead was full of possibilities, and she embraced it with a quiet confidence, ready to continue sharing her music authentically and meaningfully. Finally, she closed her eyes, allowing herself to feel the fullness of her journey. The music lingered in her heart, a testament to resilience, dedication, and the enduring power of passion. She understood that her story was not just about talent or recognition, but about the courage to embrace her calling, to persevere through years of quiet effort, and to touch lives through honest expression. With a sense of peace and quiet joy, she rested, knowing that her music would continue to resonate, guiding her and inspiring others for years to come.